Good. Laila Tov. It's good? Yeah? A little low? Oh, there we go. Laila Tov, everyone. Just take a minute to get your seats. We are now live as we enter into Shmini Atzeret, finishing Sukkot. Some of you might be wondering, well, I thought we just finished the Torah studies. And we did. Now we get to start it all over again from the beginning. Amen. So yeah, as people are filtering in before we get started, I just want to take a moment and really sincerely thank Rabbi Steve for the opportunity to really grow this week. Definitely praise Abba for that, to be able to do this and let our Nasi attend to what he needs to do. And so just want to thank him. I know maybe he's watching because he always is somewhere. But really, really sincerely want to thank him and the rest of the video crew. They're just phenomenal, and watching them work all week it's a machine, honestly. And it's a human machine at that, so. Still getting seats. Luckily, I prepared some opening jokes. No, I'm just kidding. But no, honestly, today I listened to the Torah study from Bereshith from 2 years ago, and really what a difference 2 years and a year makes. So first of all, 1 year ago, this was the first Torah study that my wife Samia and I participated in, and then 1 year later, we're here with all of you, and it's such a blessing. So praise Abba for that, indeed. And then 2 years ago, during the study, first of all, Craig Lane closed in prayer on Adobe Connect, and he was still in New York at that time. And then during the course of the Torah study, the Taylors, Nate and Dawn, were saying something like, oh yeah, we'd like to schedule a visit down there. And then they asked, in the Torah study, they said, oh, can we have your number? And Rabbi said, okay, sure, everybody should have that number. And he said, 423-825-4975. I kid you not. And then he also said that Torah study, they were supposed to do it live from a building, and they didn't have a permanent building yet. And so it's just amazing to see that we're doing it live tonight, and then next week they're going into a permanent building. So just so many blessings. Okay, so we'll get started. For those on the live stream, it's going to be very different than the Adobe Connect weekly Torah study. It will be very similar to the ones we've been doing all week for Deuteronomy. So there'll be no, ones and twos, and we don't need the people in the crowd to keep their hand up throughout the night. But it's going to be very similar. Of course, we'll do the readings. Yeah, thank you, Ali, for demonstrating what not to do. And then after, we'll do a Midrash. This time I'm on my own, so please go easy on me. And if there's any 12-year-olds asking about Nephilim, please, the door is back there. Thank you. And so then if you're on the live stream, again, just wait till the end. We'll take your questions, and then we'll answer them in the order that we have. And so before we begin... Okay. So yeah, it's just a message from Rebitz and Julie. There's a lot of noise in the back, so if you can, just come in or go out. I won't take it personally, I promise, but just so for the experience for everybody else, that would be well appreciated. And then just an announcement for YMTOI. We're going to stop after the readings, and Katan Aleph and Katan Bet are going to go up to Eureka. And then as a group, with Gadol still here, we're going to finish around 9:30, at which time the parents have to go up and retrieve their kids. Stephanie, that good?
I apologize, I have one more announcement for tomorrow. It appears that the written schedule says that the YMTUI program starts at 10. It will start at 9:30. There will be a live stream for it. So children need to be in this building at 9:15 to be ready, and we'll be live streaming starting at 9:30. Please spread the word for anybody who's not here. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we officially begin with the readings, I'm going to ask one of the men to open us up in prayer. I see some hands. I saw Gary's first. Come on up, Mr. Gary Flint, to open us up in prayer as we start Bereshith.
Vino Machenu, Abba Father, we just thank you for this wonderful time that we've had enjoying Sukkot, your feast that you have given us. And Abba, as we approach and enter into Shemini Atzeret and begin to read your Torah, Abba, and we begin a new cycle, Abba, we just pray that you would open your word, and as we open it up and read, that you give us fresh eyes and ears to see and hear all the wonderful things in this new Torah cycle. And we just give you all the praise, the honor, and glory. And we ask it all in the authority of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Gary. It brought to mind something I thought of before, that it's amazing that we have this written, but we need all of our wonderful brothers and sisters to actually read it. And by reading it, it brings the word to life. And by reading it, the word brings us to life. So that was just a really beautiful image from before, just seeing everybody read throughout the course of the week. Okay. So first up, we have my wife, Samia. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Samia, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So we'll start in chapter 1, verse 1 to verse 15.
In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. And Elohim said, "Let light come to be." And light came to be. And Elohim saw that light, that it was good. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, one day. And Elohim said, "Let an expanse come to be in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And Elohim made the expanse, and separated the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it came to be so. And Elohim called the expanse heavens. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the second day. And Elohim said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it came to be so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the collection of the waters he called seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the plant that yields seeds, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it came to be so. And the earth brought forth grass, the plant that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the third day. And Elohim said, "Let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens, to separate the day from the light, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens, to give light on earth." And it came to be so.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Next up, we have Tamara. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tamara, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So you're going to take us from verse 16 to the end of the chapter in verse 31.
And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And Elohim set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And there came to be an evening, and there came to be a morning, the fourth day. Elohim said, "Let the waters teem with the shoals of the living beings. Let birds fly above the earth on the face of the expanse of the heavens." And Elohim created the sea creatures and every living being that moves, with which the water teemed according to their kind, every winged bird according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and increase, and fill the waters in the sea. Let the birds increase on the earth." And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, the fifth day. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth the living being according to its kind, livestock and creeping creatures, and the beasts of the earth according to its kind. And it came to be so. And Elohim made the beast of the earth according to its kind, livestock according to its kind, and all that creep on the earth according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping creatures that creep on the ground. And Elohim created the man in his image. In the image of Elohim he created him. Male and female he created them. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and increase, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over it, the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, over all the creeping creatures on the earth. And Elohim said, see, I have given you every plant that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you, and it is for food. And every beast of the earth, and every bird of the heavens, and to every creeping creature on the earth, in which there is a living being, every green plant is for food. And it came to be so. And Elohim saw that he had made, and see, it was very good. And there came to be an evening, and there came to be a morning, the sixth day.
Amen. Thank you, Tamara. Next up, we have Sarah Beth. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sarah Beth, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So chapter 2, verses 1 to 14.
Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their array. And in the seventh day Elohim completed his work which he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all of his work which he had done. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and set it apart, because on it he rested from all his work which Elohim in creating had made. These are the births of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahweh Elohim made earth and the heavens. Now no shrub of the field was yet on the earth, and no plant of the field had yet sprung up, for Yahweh Elohim had not sent rain on the earth. And there was no man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth, and watered the entire surface of the ground. And Yahweh Elohim formed the man out of the dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils breath of life. And the man became a living being. And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden in Eden to the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground Yahweh Elohim made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, with the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 heads. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Chaval, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bedilim is there, and the Shahan stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Dekel. It is the one which goes toward the east of Assyria. The fourth river is the Euphrates.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Sarah Beth. Next up, we have Wayne. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Wayne, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So you'll take us from verse 15 to the end of chapter 2, verse 25.
And Yah Elohim took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. And Yah Elohim commanded the man, saying, Eat of every tree of the garden, but do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For in that day you eat of it, and it shall certainly die. And Yah Elohim said, It is not good for the man to be alone. I am going to make a helper for him as his counterpart. And from the ground Yah Elohim formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called each living being, that was his name. So the man gave names to all livestock, and to the birds of the heavens, and to every beast of the field. But for the man there was not found a helper for him as his counterpart. So Yah Elohim caused a deep sleep to fall on the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. And the rib which Yah Elohim had taken from the man he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one is called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, yet they were not ashamed.
Amen. Thank you, Wayne. Continuing in chapter 3, we have Shane. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Shane, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So you'll take us chapter 3, verse 1 to verse 12.
And the Nachash was more crafty than all the lives of the field which Yah Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, Is it true that Elohim has said, Do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the Nachash, We are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, Do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the Nachash said to the woman, You shall certainly not die, for Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise. And she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. And they heard the voice of Yah Elohim walking about in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yah Elohim among the trees of the garden. And Yah Elohim called unto Adam and said to him, Where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. And he said, Who made you know that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? And the man said, The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Shane. Continuing, we have Janet. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Janet, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Amen. So verse 13 to the end of, not chapter 5, chapter 3, verse 24. Yeah, take us to Revelation.
All right. And Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, What is this you have done? And the woman said, The Nahash deceived me, and I ate. And Yahweh Elohim said to the Nahash, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you are to go and eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception, bring forth children in pain. And your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. And to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, saying, do not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you are to eat of it all the days of your life. And the ground shall bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you are to eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you return. And the man called his wife's name Hava, because she became the mother of all living. And Yahweh Elohim made coats of skin for the man and his wife, and dressed them. And Yahweh Elohim said, see, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever. So Yahweh Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. And he drove the man out. And he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword, which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Janet. Next up we have Wesley. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Wesley, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. So starting chapter 4, verses 1 to 15.
And Adam knew Hawa his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have gained a man, Yah. And again she gave birth to his brother Abel, and Abel became a keeper of sheep, but Cain became a tiller of the ground. And it came to be, in the course of time, Cain brought an offering of fruit of the ground to Yah, and Abel brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Yah looked to Abel and his offering, but he did not look to Cain and his offering. And Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. And Yah said to Cain, why is your wrath towards you, and why is your face fallen? Is it not if you do good, you are to be accepted, and if you do not do good, towards the door is a sin. He is lying, and towards you is his desire, and you must rule over him. And Cain told Abel his brother, and it came to be, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. And Yah said to Cain, where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's guard? And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. And if you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you, and you shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. And Cain said to Yah, my punishment is too great to bear. See, you have driven me from the face of the ground today, and I am hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and it shall be that anyone who finds me kills me. And Yah said to him, Well, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance is taken on him sevenfold. And Yah set up a sign for Cain, lest anyone finds him, strikes him. If anyone finding him strikes him.
Amen. Thank you, Wesley. Next up, we have Michael. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Michael, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. We're going to finish chapter 4, verses 16 to 26.
So Cain went out from the presence of Yah and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Hanok. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Hanok. And to Hanok was born Irad, and Irad brought forth Mehuael, and Mehuael brought forth Methusael, and Methusael brought forth Lamech. And Lamech took for himself 2 wives. The name of one was Adah, the name of the second was Tisla. And Adah bore Yabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents with livestock. And his brother's name was Yubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and the flute. As for Tisla, she also bore Tubal Cain, a smith of all kinds of tools in bronze and iron. And the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Tisla, hear my voice. Wives of Lamech, listen to my words. For I have killed a man for wounding me, even a young man for hurting me. For Cain is avenged sevenfold, and Lamech 77fold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Sheth. For Elohim has appointed me another seed instead of Abel, because Cain had killed him. And to Sheth, to him also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. Then it was begun to call on the name of Yah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Michael. Next up, we have Jason. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Jason, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Starting chapter 5, verses 1 through 16.
This is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that Elohim created man, he made him in the likeness of Elohim. Male and female he created them, and he blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and brought forth a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Sheth. And after he brought forth Sheth, the days of Adam were 800 years, and he brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And Sheth lived 105 years and brought forth Enosh. And after he brought forth Enosh, Sheth lived 807 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Sheth were 912 years, and he died. And Enosh lived 90 years and brought forth Canaan. And after he brought forth Canaan, Enosh lived 815 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years and brought forth Mahalalel. And he brought forth Mahalalel. Canaan lived 840 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel lived 65 years and brought forth Yerev. And after he brought forth Yered, Mahalalel lived 830 years and brought forth sons and daughters.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Bill, yeah. Next up we have Bill. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Bill, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. We'll finish chapter 5, verses 17 to 32.
So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And Yered lived 162 years and brought forth Henoch. And after he brought forth Henoch, Yered lived 800 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Yered were 962 years, and he died. And Henoch lived 65 years and brought forth Methuselah. And after he brought forth Methuselah, Henoch walked with Elohim 300 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Henoch were 365 years. And Henoch walked with Elohim. Then he was no more, for Elohim took him. And Methuselah lived 187 years and brought forth Lamech. And after he had brought forth Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years and brought forth a son and called his name Noah, saying, "This one does comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which Yah has cursed." And after he brought forth Noah, Lamech lived 595 years and brought forth sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old. And Noah brought forth Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Bill. Our final reader for the evening, taking us into chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, will be Reno. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Reno, who has come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Amen. Verses 1 through 8.
And it came to be, when man began to increase on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, that they were good, and they took wives of themselves, of all whom they chose. And Yah said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever in his going astray. He is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of Elohim came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, the men of name. And Yah saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yah was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And Yah said, I'm going to wipe off man whom I have created from the face of the ground, both man and beast, creeping creature and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Reno. Thank you to all the readers tonight. It really is a blessing to read before brothers and sisters, so thank you. recite the traditional closing blessing. Just want to say, I've led a couple of the Adobe Connect Torah studies, and seeing everyone's face when they come up for that opening blessing really is very powerful. And I know Rabbi Steve has said before that he loves teaching in person, and there was a time where he was teaching and it was just a screen. No, he couldn't see anybody, but your faces and your presence is really what makes it happen. So just thank you, because it really was a blessing for me to give that blessing to you, and just blessings all around. That's what our Father's about. Okay, so we are going to, before we start the Midrash, Katan Aleph and Katan Bet will be released up to Eureka. Josh is in the back right there, and James, thank you. Is that good? Yeah. All right. This is new. We'll give them a couple minutes and then we'll start the Midrash. Is it? Oh, yeah. Could we have hey, Nolan, are you going with the kids team? Or are you staying here? If you're staying here, would you mind passing around the mic for questions? That's only if you're here. I'm not going to prevent you from leaving. Okay. Yeah, and the parents will have to pick up the children in Eureka when we're done. I will read the traditional closing blessing, which I temporarily forgot. My apologies. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Amen. Okay, so as they are exiting, we're going to start the Midrash. And as always, as Rabbi Steve has trained me in these Torah studies, explained to me, okay, always explain where we're not going to go first, and then explain where we will go. So just to lay those out first, just so everyone's on the same page. Number one, we're not going to be doing any individual counsel, either here or questions on the live stream. I say this very, very having the proper fear of this microphone right here. And only just being, beginning in the discipleship process, I'm not qualified to answer anything on an individual basis, so please direct that to M2I leadership. I would appreciate that. Number two, we're not going to go into anything that's going to be in that kind of very interesting and entertaining route. I know Rabbi Steve has an in-focus called Useful, Interesting, and Entertaining, focusing on the useful, looking at the portion and seeing, okay, where can we apply this in our walk? Where do we see ourselves? And I said we weren't going to do ones and twos, but I think this could be a good question. We'll do one hand up for one and two for two. Can we agree that we're dealing with some of the most powerful aspects in all of Scripture with the creation of all things? Ones and twos. All right, we got ones, right. So can we agree that there's probably things we don't understand? Right, we watch movies and we don't even understand the plot. Seriously, I have to, routinely ask my wife, hey, what is going on here? I don't quite understand, and vice versa. But this is something, this is the creation of every living thing. So I think that's an important framework to lay down because, like Rabbi says, how are we going to understand a human being if we're an amoeba? And just at the Q&A with leadership, they were explaining that that's not even the proper scale. It's unfathomable. So just to lay that out, I have a couple points throughout the time that we'll be doing this, but of course, you are welcome to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. Nolan will be passing around the mic, and we can just get started, and we will keep going until we have no more questions, or you guys are sick of hearing my voice. Whichever comes first. Questions, comments? Janet?
Yes, please, Mr. David. chapter 1, 29, when it says, "See, I have given you every plant that yields seed which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed to you, it is for food." I know a lot of people use that verse to support a vegan diet. I know later on, after the flood, we were instructed that we could eat flesh. In my own personal life, I do think that when I eat just vegan, I feel better too. But I wanted to see if you have any clarification on the diet based on this verse.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
So that's actually thankfully covered in the Torah Study archive that I listened to from 2 years ago, this afternoon at about 3 o'clock in the BRC. Before this, I just want to thank two people. I want to thank Raymond Ramlow for this wonderful idea to do Torah Study tonight. Really such a blessing, and I said this earlier, but it really reminds me of the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah as we finish Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, and we rejoice in the beginning of the Torah cycle. So thank you, Raymond, and thank you, Dan, for lending his scriptures for us to use tonight, because the large print that was up here earlier, I guess it was tired of being read for 5 days straight, so it needed a break. That question, how Rabbi explained it earlier in the Torah study, was that it would be preferential to find fruits that are not, GMO and not man-made and not altered in that aspect. And with that, the next verse, in terms of verse 30, I know people also use that verse to say, everything is for food. And both Rabbi and Raymond, kind of a tag team in that, explain that in the grammar here, it's going to be everything that is food, that is living, is to be eaten. So in here, it could be, again, twisted to this idea of, everything can be eaten. But again, this is just only the ones that are already for food will be given. So in terms of a vegan diet, I know rabbis addressed this before, that would be preference, but in terms of this verse and how it was understood, or at least how I understood it in the Torah study from 2 years ago, it was specifically about, yes, it is best to look at the foods and the fruits that are not going to be altered and GMO by man, as obviously that is something that Yah did not create. At the same token, we're at a point in time where it is pretty hard and difficult to distinguish what might possibly be GMO or not GMO and how we do that. So again, like everything, I think good counsel if there's something on the line. But in terms of the outright clean and unclean foods, this is consistent with everything else we find in Leviticus 11 and the clean food laws. Does that help? Dawn?
And to piggyback on that, I guess my question is, so can we eat seedless things?
Seedless grapes or
seedless
other?
Watermelon, seedless grape, because they have no seed. According to that, we shouldn't eat them.
Yeah, so that question was also put in the Torah study, and there wasn't an answer, so I don't have that for you. I don't know if there's somebody else. More Raymond would be able to answer that. But for me, as I know, I don't know where that would go. I don't assume it would be a problem, but I don't want to speak instruction into your life without proper authorization. Raymond, want help?
I guess it's on already. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to ask is, so isn't there someone more qualified to answer this? No, because we really don't want to have to, put things out there and say, well, this is how it is, unless it's very, very clear in the Word. And one of the most difficult areas for us to address is when we're getting into the kinds of things that they didn't see or that they didn't have to think about. That's one of the toughest areas. Now, sometimes you might think just because you can't see a seed in something that it isn't there. That's not necessarily the case. When we see how widely the Scripture uses the word seed, we understand that you wouldn't think in terms of the seeds of a watermelon that human beings have anything like that in them, and yet we know with how widely the word uses seed that indeed human beings have that, okay? Animals have that. Even mushrooms have that, okay? It's just not necessarily something that you'd look at and see as a seed, but indeed, if it has the ability to reproduce itself, okay, via a tiny little part of itself. Just because the way that fish or human beings do that is different from the way that a watermelon might do that, you wouldn't say scripturally that humans have no seed or that, mammals have no seed. So scripturally we do. Mushrooms also do, after that same fashion, have small pieces of themselves that they use to spread and reproduce. And so it's for this reason that the Jewish community and also our community has historically seen no problem with eating things like mushrooms. Now, when you get into the issue of a seedless watermelon, I don't know about you, but I find it rather difficult to find an actually seedless watermelon. What I find is watermelon advertised as seedless, but there really are actually little vestigial seeds in there. And so the question is not for me usually whether or not there's a seed, but is the seed functional? And that gets into this whole weird area of, do we discriminate against something and treat it as if it can't fulfill its purpose just because its seed isn't functional? And that's not something I'd really want to have to apply across the board, especially when you think of applying it to people, animals, etc. So I think that it's better to just recognize that whether it's a watermelon, whether the seed is perfectly functional or not, it's after the kind of something that was created for food.
Amen. Thank you, Raymond. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think what he said about the context about interacting with items that they didn't actually have to see. We addressed this a couple days ago in Deuteronomy 22:5, talking about a woman does not wear which pertains to a man, and vice versa. And of course, the question is always, we get this on the Facebook page all the time, can women wear pants? And like Rabbi explained the other day, well, there were no pants at that time. There were robes and other forms of dress that didn't include that type of pants. So I think that's a really great, context to have first to lay down to understand what it's talking about. Anybody else? Robin, right?
Okay, I just wanted to clarify verse 30 there. I don't know if this is what was intended by what you were saying, but my understanding here is it's not promoting eating of the animals. It's saying that those green plants are for the animals. So the original diet was intended to be vegan. And since we're doing a lot of practicing of the feast and things that we're going to carry out in the new earth, don't throw things at me, but I think we ought to practice that diet.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I haven't studied this out, and I think that's definitely a good connection there, especially given the context of the previous verse. And again, I know rabbis addressed this in terms of obviously the diet that we need to have is clean, period, and after that, based on health conditions or preferences, but I think that would be a really interesting study to study out. I have not personally, but yeah, I think that's a very great way to connect possibly practicing for the future. And something that Rabbi said before actually too is that in our community, there is a tendency for focus on health and wanting to be healthier, whether that's alternative, practices. I mean, Uncle Bob is a great example with the oils, people looking at alternative diets. So I think it's pretty interesting, again, not across the board, but that within the Israelite community, there is some sort of focus on wanting to be healthy and research and understanding that what we're given, as my wife and I talk about, yeah, it may be edible, but that doesn't make it food. And that's what we see a lot, now, and it's unfortunate, but I think it's great that we have people in our community that like to encourage that and have great resources of information that we can talk to with one another, far more than you'd find maybe in other groups. So thank you. Someone calling in? Question? Oh, Raymond, sorry.
So it was just a little addendum to the whole food conversation. Two things. One thing that I realized after I sat down that really should have been a part of the first thing, and that is it's very, very functional for us to realize that issues of kashrut are like issues of calendar and have never really been up to an individual Israelite to decide because they are things that very easily divide a community. And if you haven't experienced that, then maybe just have a few more conversations with your relatives who eat pork and don't understand why you don't. Okay, but issues of kashrut can very easily divide a community, and so just as much as issues of calendar. And so that if you were wondering why I hesitated to step into talking about that, it's because I wanted to very carefully make sure I remember what our community has always taught on those issues, and I'm very confident that that's also what Nasi Steve has taught on those issues. So along those lines, also similarly about the ideal diet, there's no debate that in Genesis 1:30, the lions were eating grass. But they can't live like that now. I want us to all reflect on that. The design was changed after whatever you want to call it, the fall, the curse, the expulsion, etc. The design was changed, and the lions can't survive off of grass anymore. Okay? So we recognize that the design was changed not only for lions and tigers and bears.
Don't tell Curtis that. Yeah.
Okay, the design was also changed for us. Okay? We are not the same type of being that we were in the garden. Some things are different. And if you really think about it, the vegetarian, the vegan diets, while some people may need those for medical reasons, etc., it's really only possible to do those with any semblance of healthiness due to modern science. It's not something that would have been sustainable down through the ages. And people who've tried it in prior centuries and tried to go very, very deep into that have found some severe complications with vitamin deficiencies and whole protein deficiencies and other things. It's very complicated. I'm so thankful that today the technologies exist to be able to support that diet for people who need it. But it's not been seen by the leaders of our community as something that is for all. And I would be careful of dishonoring all of our elders by saying they don't know what they're talking about, and that somehow meat is not for us to eat today, especially when we see so many things in the Torah and also in Brit Chadashah that specifically address eating the meat. And so I think it's difficult to say differently from that without treading on ground I don't want to tread on.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we have a question from the live stream, and then have a couple points. Oh, okay. Kurt first. Shamash Kurt.
Just kind of pointing out this people are quickly reading all this, getting led to vegan, but keep in mind the Levites and the priest, they would take the choice of meats for themselves. So obviously Yahweh put it in the scripture that was for them to eat. So obviously he wouldn't do that if there wasn't something we could gain from eating that. So like Raymond said, things have changed, but it's clearly sanctioned inside the scriptures here.
Yeah, things have changed, and so will the subject. I'm going to go to chapter 1 in verse 4. Just quickly, and we'll get to a couple questions, because I thought this was pretty cool. Just reading this out and then through listening to the Torah study. Well, we see here in verse 14 that Elohim appoints the light in the expanse of the heavens. But then in verse 4, 3 and 4, we see that light is coming to be. And so we understand here definitely in the framework of creation, and as Rabbi teaches in the Father and the Son teaching, and here being this is still Elohim, and we're not introduced to Yahweh Elohim until later, we have a clear indication of Yeshua here being the light and seeing that it was good, and separating the light from the darkness. As we know, that's something that we've experienced in our own lives, that not only have we tasted and seen that the Master is good, but that light pervades into everything once it's created and once we're able to really walk with it. Along the same lines, a lot of people ask, okay, well, why does it start evening first and then go to morning? And then something there that Rabbi touched on in the Torah study was that it is kind of a hint at our walk, that we start in nothing, we start in darkness, and then we're able to then go towards light. I find it interesting, too, that in Deuteronomy and the Vehafta, the framework, and this is just something that I've looked at, it doesn't make it definite, but it talks about, well, okay, when you lie down and then when you rise up. And I find it interesting that possibly there in the V'ahavta there is that Hebraic understanding of evening starting first, and then going from darkness to light, and walking from the futility in our old ways into the newness of Messiah Yeshua. We had a question? No? Okay, keep going. Verse 26. It says, and Elohim said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. I don't know what consonant phrase from Rabbi Steve does that come to mind? Torah does what? Bless you, keeps you safe, and transforms us, right, from what we are to what he is, to the image of the Son. So I think that here, right there, is that as we've been learning, especially in the Are You Covenanted series, and even today, this idea of the root of bitterness leading to idolatry, leading to more root of bitterness, that we're always trying to make Elohim into our own image and our own conveniences into what we like and what we prefer. And anyone who's gone through the heart of the matter sees how foolish that is, because honestly, there's nothing more than we can do to just completely submit and obey to his image, as we see here in verse 26. And that from also connecting to the idea of the sequence of time and going from darkness to light and from evening to morning, and Yeshua being created, or here indicated the light in verse 4. Well, in verse 2, you see something that's formless and empty. The Hebrew there is tohu vavohu. It just means it's chaos, it's formless, there's nothing there. And I think we all can testify to that we look back, and maybe when we're in it at first, we don't realize how formless and empty we were. But then as time goes on, with counsel, with community, with discipleship, with submission to that headship, we can look back and see that formless and emptiness that we had before. Nothing? Oh, wow. All right, well. Okay, Christine. Thank you.
Which camera am I looking at?
Both.
I can see it right here. So previous mentors that I've had really went into some of the Hebrew words in Genesis, especially chapter 1. And one of the words that he said is written all in the Hebrew, but not at all in the English, is the word et.
Do you know how it's spelled?
I think the transliteration is ETH.
ETH? Et. Aleph Tav?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. In what context?
And, I wish I had it here with me, but I don't have it where it's written, because I just have the English version. But I was wondering if you had any insight on that.
So in verse 1, we have Bereshith bara Elohim et hashamayim. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
So usually in the context, et haaretz, so it's, in that context, it's referring like to. So Yahweh created the heavens and the earth. I mean, et also has, it's pulling on some old Hebrew training here, but the idea of kind of pointing to, and not like in the idea of pointing to, but to et, in that direction. So again, here the Hebrew to the English, I don't know if you had a question about something more it could mean, but usually it's used just as this, the word to describe what it's talking about. That's what I meant.
Okay. I guess what I learned, and this could totally be wrong, that's why I'm bringing it up, is that it's, like you said, it says for the Aleph Tav, which is kind of symbolizes the entire Hebrew alphabet, and so it means like the word, but it could also mean Yeshua.
Yeah. And again, as we know from the Hebraic context, there's not one or the other. There's multiple that we can understand and glean from that. So I think that's really beautiful. Just as, for example, the Jewish community, and this is fitting because we literally just finished Deuteronomy and are beginning Genesis, that if you take the first Hebrew letter in Genesis, which is bet, and then the last letter of the last word in Deuteronomy, which is lamed, and you reverse it, it spells lev, which means heart. And so that's, as we know, rabbis hinted on that. That's something, honestly, I learned as a young age. They drilled that into you, that between Genesis and Deuteronomy contain Yahweh's heart. So that's, again, something like that where I would not be able to stand up here and say no. All I could say is I haven't studied to that degree, but why not? Because there's so many layers to this that we know, as Rabbi described this morning, that progressive revelation as we continue to walk in both spirit and in truth, and we're able to, get that understanding from the Ruach. And I think that's something I want to touch on just briefly, this idea of not understanding, and just say a personal example. A couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were studying, we were just reading some verses for, I think it was Yom HaKippurim, and we were Skyping with her mom in Mexico. Hi, shalom, hola. And we were reading Jude, and there was the question about the Archangel Michael and rebuking Hasatan and not wanting to bring that blasphemous judgment. And at that time, I said something, not rude, but I was just like, oh, okay, well, it's not, halakhic, and, it doesn't matter necessarily. So we come here, and Curtis collectively blows our minds, talking about that very verse and how Archangel Michael there possibly was being tested by Yahweh, and that the blasphemous judgment would be him taking it into his own hands, but rather he used the authority of Yahweh to then handle that situation. So I say this to say, in these situations, what I should have said is, I don't understand it right now, but I will pray, and hopefully the Father will give me that understanding in the time that it needs. And turns out we were here. I didn't say that at that time, I'll be honest. I kind of just discarded it, but now in that framework, we're able to look at things, and just like Rabbi said, is rather than necessarily challenging it and saying, okay, maybe it's right or wrong, just addressing it in a way as we don't understand it now, and maybe that's just part of the timing that we don't need it. So that's not meant to you personally, but just meant as that framework. That's something that I learned from just in the past couple of weeks by learning from Rabbi today, that there's so many layers, and who are we to decide when and how we understand it. Oh, Barbara? And then
yes, this is Barbara.
Donna.
And two things. When I was studying this previously, they always said that there was one word that was not translated by the Hebrews or the Jews, and that was the Aleph Tav. And that like she said, it was Yeshua. And he had not come yet, and so I suppose that's why they would not translate it. I don't know. But the other thing is, you were saying that we come from darkness into light. Well, also, the whole earth came from total darkness into light as well. So there's another relationship there.
Amen. Yeah, the first part, the second part, it's beautiful and a beautiful image. And the first part, I don't know. I'll be honest, I didn't have that degree. I was in Jewish day school. All I can say to that, though, in terms of the relationship with Messiah, and Rabbi Steve, Rabbi Tom, and Curtis discussed that way more thoroughly this afternoon, but it is an interesting relationship that I remember growing up. There's countless songs about Messiah and Mashiach and Mashiach and Mashiach, but it's just a completely different understanding that he hadn't come yet. And again, we learned this afternoon that this is not. It's not that they're necessarily rejecting, just as Rabbi Steve explained in his journey that he mentioned he was going to refilm, that he wasn't rejecting it. It was just having trouble reconciling things. And I think that's a big aspect in the Jewish community. And as Curtis uses the flying fox example from one side of the riverbank to the other, one riverbank being, and this is generalization, of course, many degrees along that spectrum, but from Judaism or Christianity to Judaism is that trouble reconciling those aspects. So I think that's a big part of it that we definitely have to shine that light to our brothers, and that's something that we've been discussing in the men's Marco Polo a lot too, is the aspect that we know from Scripture that Judah will be provoked to jealousy, right? And so what we've been discussing is, okay, well, as Israel, they have to be jealous of something. And I think that speaks to exactly what Rabbi's just been drilling in us, is the unity, it's the submission, it's, Curtis talking about leaving all that stuff at the door. This is the house of Israel. We shouldn't be finding what we find out in Rome in the house. It's just that aspect of understanding that we are to be that light. And I really love what Rabbi said, I don't know when it was, too many teachings to remember, but that we were supposed to be the envy of the world, not envy the world. We had Donna? Nate, and then Donna. Yeah.
So, if it's all right with you, Dave, I'd like to just make a statement concerning food that we eat today. I know we're trying to drift away.
Yeah,
from
sure.
it. Okay.
Quickly.
Okay. No problem. I'm under authority. He's representing Rabbi, so I have no problem with that. I just wanted to encourage everyone as we're learning to walk as a community and we're learning to come out of where we were in Mitzrayim and everything else. Even eating vegan, we have to be careful because even the foods that we eat or we think is food is not even really that much good food anymore. Because HaSatan's goal is to try and get Yahweh's potential people to deviate from what it means to be set apart. So any way that he can contaminate us or divert us from that goal helps him with his purpose. So we should be thinking along the lines of, as we're growing together, hey, how do we start growing in our own community, our own food, raising our own sheep that aren't full of junk and all this other stuff that the rest of the culture is trying to put into our vegetables, like frog DNA and all this other stuff with our sheep. So those of you that are farmers and people that love animals and all those things, maybe once we start getting together and talking, we start figuring out, hey, Rabbi, how can we start working together and start getting this to each other so that we know that we're eating clean? Everything is clean that we eat.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Nate. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I really love you even talking about the other day about this aspect of the third tithe and this idea that if we're all tithing as we're supposed to, and that idea of the third tithe on that rolling basis as per the Deuteronomy 17 decision by MTOI, that there could be such a need, and apparently you had already volunteered to head that department, of helping people transition to the places and the congregations that they need to be. I just see Dawn looking at Nate like, what department did you? We're just dreaming, yeah. But just one strike against the vegan diet that does contain leeks, so. Just saying. Donna?
I wanted to kind of go back to what you were saying about the et, and I haven't heard the full teaching of Rabbi Steve on any of that or whatever. But if I'm not, correct me first, is the et comes after the word created, right, in the Hebrew? So it would be like et hashamayim, right? Oh, sorry. The et would come after the created. So if it is a strong hint, possibly, if it is, of Yeshua being the fullness of the Word, or else the Word, it's like we know that Elohim spoke everything into existence, so therefore he would have had to have created the Aleph through the Tav, the whole alphabet, to be able to speak all of this into existence. And at the same time, from John chapter 1, where it says that the Word was with God, and with Elohim, and Elohim, he was Elohim. So we know he was very active in that part of it. I think there may be a strong hint of Yeshua in the very beginning of that whole creation to tie it all together from beginning to end.
Yeah, absolutely. That teaching possibly is do you know the Father and the Son? And that's absolutely correct. That's what Rabbi teaches in that teaching. And just going ahead, you don't have to turn there, Genesis 19:24, and it'll sound familiar for those who are in the leadership. But it says, "And Yahweh rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Amorah from Yahweh out of the heavens." So we see throughout, and this even goes into Isaiah, I'm not going to re-quote the verses that Rabbi Steve mentioned, but that there is this participation process, and we know that the Father cannot interact with that sin and death, and so until from Genesis 1:1 to all the way to Revelation 21, the Father's not there until he himself comes down, as Rabbi explained, as well after we've gotten ourselves ready. So that's absolutely correct that Yeshua was there, and that is fully explained in more detail in the Do You Know the Father and the Son teaching. No?
Yes, I know that on iTunes, I don't know about on any of the other outlets, there is a Torah portion, Bereshith, that's on there, and where Rabbi Steve actually goes through a little bit of that with the Aleph and the Tav. So, but it's on iTunes. I don't know if it's on Podomatic or, I know it's not on YouTube, but it's on. I don't know if it's on Podomatic either. So.
Awesome, thank you. No, yeah, we can track that down, and then if you're interested, maybe we can post it in the MTOI Facebook group. We have Laura over here, and then back to the live stream.
So I just have two things that I want to explore. Again, just a second with food. Elohim gave us bread as a representation of the bread of life. And throughout scriptures, bread has become such an important part of the symbolism for life. And when you look at what the farming industry has done to our grains, they've stripped the goodness out of our grains and call it bread. Even when you buy whole wheat bread, the government has allowed them to remove about, I think it's like 40% of the grain and still be able to call it whole wheat. So, people might want to start looking at organic breads or ancient grains and that as a way of eating as well. The other thing that I want to change. I'm looking at chapter 3, and in verse 15, and I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. So I just wanted a little clarification on that, because they're talking about Hasatan, I guess, his seed. So where does that seed come from in the story, and how does that play out with?
Yeah, so the enmity there, which I think is the key, because in terms of knowing what seed, and I mean, couldn't even begin to muster up an understanding of that, but Rabbi Steve addresses this in part 53 of the Heart of the Matter, talking about the enmity being that key aspect. And this goes throughout even to the Brit Hadashah. I think it's in Romans. It's talking about this enmity. And this enmity is this idea of this disagreement. Enmity is a strong word, but this battle between the works of Hasatan and the works of Elohim as manifested through us. And so a lot what Rav Shaul, what Paul is talking about in terms of this enmity that is removed, is not only on the spiritual level of removing that enmity within us between the works of Hasatan and Elohim, and therefore just choosing Elohim, but also that manifested through Yeshua, the enmity between those who are only born of bloodline and those who are not. And so he was addressing in that enmity, this is just the Brit example, this disagreement and this conflict in his congregation that needed to stop, because we know that through Yeshua there's no respecter of persons to begin with, and that through him everyone, once Messiah, can be. It doesn't matter what bloodline you were. So it's definitely got those two layers in part 53. I mean, I would recommend parts 1 to 52 before that. But the enmity there is this, tension that Rav Shaul is always referring to. I mean, you think about Romans 7, he's just talking about the things that he doesn't want to do, that he does, and the law of sin and death versus the law of life. And so this enmity is there. So the actual seed, I have no idea, but I know that that enmity is related both in what we need to conquer in ourselves and overcome, but then also what he was addressing is a very contentious issue between those who did not want the Gentiles coming in and wanted to keep it for themselves, which obviously we know was not and should not be the case. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
I think what you just said, Mr. David, is related to my question here. Chapter 6, verse 5, it says, "And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." So I am at least the same as they were. So if evil is continually in my heart or in my mind, I guess my question will be, or my assumption is that I need to continually fight off that evil that is in me. And how do I know Rabbi always says that Torah kills the flesh. And so I guess through Torah, we can overcome the flesh. But you have any more insights on that process? Thank you.
So the question is, the process of overcoming flesh, and well, we're all here for that same reason. But the thoughts of the heart, that's huge, and that is the heart of the matter. That's why Rabbi spent 64 parts on that. My favorite is that in part 1, he refers to it as a multi-part series. He had no idea what he was getting into. It gives me a laugh every time, but it talks about when our heart does not match his heart, it grieves his heart. And the fact that we are foolish enough to decide that we think we know better and to choose our own heart, which doesn't match his heart. And I know Rabbi talks about how this idea of, it's not that the Father wants us to stumble in our own ways, but he wants us to realize, to get to a point, and a possible breaking point, that our ways don't work, and that we want to go after his ways and realize that his ways bring to life as merciful, compassionate, loving Father that he is. So in terms of the actual overcoming, I mean, that's the process that we're all here. I know that Rabbi explains also that, Torah keeps you safe, right? And so the more likely that you're doing Torah, the less likely you're going to sin. I can't remember the verse right now. I think it's in John, talking about, those who are in Torah and those are guarding the commands, do not sin. Well, it's not that you're not capable of sin as a human. It's just that as you walk this out, you're less enticed by those aspects. And that enticing is your heart, right? As we know, how those actions are formed. You have a thought, you dwell on it, goes into your heart, and then that comes an action, then become a habit, becomes your character, and then your destiny. And so ultimately, realizing that if we create those roots, whether they're roots of bitterness or roots of lust after greed, or it could be lust after sexual, or whatever the context is that we know it does not go along with his ways, and we spend time doing that, well, we're going to end off the path. So, I mean, there's no answer to in terms of that process of overcoming. I mean, I can just say, for example, for me, I used to watch a lot of sports. I asked my wife, it was terrible. It was idolatry in that degree. And now the more that I'm studying, the more I study and listen to teachings and spend time with all you wonderful people and read, the more progressive revelation I'm given. And that stuff just doesn't interest me anymore. I just look at it and it's like, really? I mean, I tried watching it one night, 15 minutes, and I just turned on Heart of the Matter because I couldn't anymore. And that doesn't make it wrong. I enjoy watching sports, I do, but it's just not the priority right now. So, we know Rabbi teaches that the sin that we want to do, and I think that's the you sicko one. There 3 weeks in a row, there was you sicko, you're drunk, your feelings are hanging out. It's just, I love it when he doesn't pull the punches. But we do it because we want to. And why do we want to? Because, we think we know better, or because we like it. And I don't think we've realized, and our Rabbi talked about this, and this really hit me, is that we think all of these things, it's not good for us. And of course, but we don't understand that it is an abomination to him. Anything other than what he's laid out to us is not what we should be partaking in. And so realizing that it grieves him, as we see here, that it grieves his heart, just, was it Deuteronomy 5:29? Like, oh, that they had a heart in them to guard. It's just like, come on, I'm giving this to you. And so when we want those things, because we think that we know better, and we don't understand the realness of the Father and the Son, which Rabbi talked about, that if your boss or this item that is giving you stumbling in your walk is more real than the Father and the Son sitting at his right hand, well, then we have to evaluate what our true emunah and true actions look like. I saw that, Manny. Yeah. Thanks for the coin, yeah. Olivier?
Hi. Just to go back to a point that we were talking earlier on Joshua being there at the beginning of the world. Something that strikes me in chapter 3:8, when they said, and they heard the voice of Yahweh Elohim walking in the garden in the cool of the day. So I hear voice and walking. So is it too simplistic to just see Joshua right there because he's walking like a man would walk?
Yeah, I think that could be one interpretation. Again, I think there's multiple levels, as we know from the Pardes acronym, the Peshat, the Remez, the Drash, and the Sod. Peshat being the literal, straightforward, the Remez being the hinted at, the Drash being the more illuminated explanation, and the Sod being the secret, deep level. So with that, that's something that we've definitely discussed in our own home, just, hey, this image of walking around and the voice. We also know that walking and voice are found throughout Scripture on very deeper levels, about how can two walk together if they don't agree, walk humbly with your Elohim, the idea of progressing forward in this relationship. Rabbi said somewhere in Heart of the Matter that Yahweh will tell you where to put your feet, but you have to put your feet. Right? You have to cooperate in that process. So I think that's absolutely possible. And again, we don't know what this garden actually looked like, and the bounty and just what it was. I mean, that before they were separated, hinting, and this is talking about Adam and Chava, and reunited to hint at echadness, the fact that they were this type of being that we couldn't even comprehend. I mean, there's so much to it. But I'm glad you brought that out also in terms of voice, because we know that, for example, in the Father and the Son teaching, the my sheep know my voice, the voice being this understanding who's talking to us and who we have to listen to, and also possibly that small, still voice that Rabbi talks about that is, the Father's voice that we should listen to. So there's kind of this convicting voice, or possibly here, they heard the voice. So whether that's the physical, Yeshua's walking there and finding out what they did, or when you do something and you just know, like, shouldn't be doing this, he's watching. So that's a possible explanation. I just wanted to touch on the verse before, because this just happened when I was reading today, talking about the eyes of both of them were opened and that they knew they were naked. So again, another possible interpretation here, and I'm looking at this for, again, how can we walk out of here and be like, oh, I can do that right now, rather than trying to understand what type of leaf it was and if they were actually naked or not. But I know rabbis taught that it's this idea of being uncovered. And uncovering, when we don't have that covering, whether that's husband to wife, and Curtis touched on that just beautifully in his usurping authority teaching, or leadership, or in general not submitting under the headship of Yeshua, we're uncovered and we're naked. We don't have that covering on that beautiful, beautiful path that Rabbi paints out, the blood of Yeshua. And then with that they sewed fig leaves together, and it just hit me today for the first time, and rabbis touched on that fig is related to teaching and learning Torah, about everyone sitting underneath their own fig tree, Yeshua talking about the fig tree. And so this hit me today, that it's possible that with them being uncovered, and we're not supposed to sow those fig leaves for ourselves. We're supposed to be covered in the proper vertical alignment, which is the Creator's design, and not take it into our own hands. Sarah Beth?
Yes. I was trying to find the useful.
Thank you.
And I wanted to know if I packaged this right. I found one thing and then it all snowballed, but it's all kind of the same thing. Looking at it, and he saw it was very good. It struck me how powerful when a father says or approves of their child, how powerful that is, and how that's what we're looking for him to say, well done. And then, I know it's not exactly discipleship language, but you don't do discipleship unless you have someone setting an example for you to follow. And here it is, Elohim setting that first example of him keeping the Sabbath. And then going to chapter 3, Yahweh asking, how do you know you're naked? What happened? And obviously Yahweh knew, but he sets the example for judgment, hearing. We hear later told to the judges, you'll hear the matter out before you make a judgment. And he went through every single one and heard their side.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Sarah Beth. Yeah, it's very true. The first point of that affirmation, and I think that's something that rabbis touched on time and time again, that how beautiful and wonderful it is that we know that our Father won't break any word, won't break any promise. He's unwavering and all of that. The covenant, the promises, every single aspect of that, and we don't have that in our human interaction, often with parents starting with that, and just in general, that affirmation, your word, and that expression, I'll give you my word. What does that necessarily mean anymore? And I think that's just beautiful, and thank you, Sarah Beth, for pointing that out, that affirmation from the only one that has the proper qualifications to tell whether it's good or not. And Yeshua said, no one is good but my Father, and we know that isn't, nothing is good but what comes from him, and what comes from him is Torah. And so, again, we addressed this as the Q&A. That doesn't mean you can't use the word good, and other words starting with a G, as Rabbi Tom pointed out. But the fact is that rather than us seeing what is good in our own eyes, which then leads to those heart actions that are not on the path, we have to go with what is good by him, and we will hear those words. Well done, good and trustworthy servant. So thank you for that. And then in terms of the hearing the matter out, I think that's fantastic. And I know we've talked a lot this week about slander and lashon hara, which is the evil speak. And as Rabbi explained there, and I think it's worth reiterating in his exact words, is that that's not just explaining what happened, right? Because here, Yeshua is asking, Yahweh Elohim is asking, okay, what is happening and what happened? Well, when you get into a situation, you have to explain kind of the play-by-play according to your reality and perception of it. Doesn't mean that's the reality, but you have to explain what happened. But that lashon hara is saying something to negatively influence the opinion of others in a harmful or shameful way. So we see this, I think it's in Matthew, somewhere, I don't know where it is. But just talking about when Yeshua was teaching and they say, oh, see, he blasphemes. I don't remember exactly what that is, but the idea there was to talk to the crowd to say, look, make this opinion about Yeshua, therefore to do something negative. And so I think that's important to keep in mind on two parts, like Rabbi explains. Number one, that when we explain situations, that doesn't mean that we're doing lashon hara, but if we're already bringing something to get that confirmation or to influence other people, that is when we cross into that. So it's a very fine line, but I think it's something that we can take. And so thank you for bringing that out, that also we have to hear the matter out. We see that later in Deuteronomy, we see that in Proverbs. That is our job when we hear something in the camp, or even outside the camp, at work, in other situations, possible, I don't know, school for children, to understand that just because someone says something, understand, okay, where did that come from? And maybe ask, okay, why are you telling me? Curtis had some great examples of to ask the questions in a way that will reveal kind of what the point is, and to understand that we don't need to be participating in that type of behavior or talking, and we have to search out if that matter is true, because it's so easy to hear something and jump to that conclusion, and we all have gold medals in that, as we know from Rabbi Steve. Next. I saw Raymond. Mark, Raymond, Donna, Bill.
Thank you, David. Thing I was seeing here is in 3:16. And it's more like, it's also over in chapter 4, but here in 3:16 it is, to the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow in your conception, bring forth children in pain, and your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. Then in 4:6, and Yahweh said to Cain, why is he wroth towards you? Why is your face fallen? Is it not if you do good, you are to be accepted? And if you do not do good, towards the door is a sin, he is lying, and towards you is his desire, and you must rule over him. And I just saw the commonality in the phrasing there of the desire. It's the desire of the sin towards the man. In the previous phrase, it's like a control struggle. And then I'm not going to read very much of it, but in Romans 7, where Rab Shaul begins, but if I do not do what I wish, I agree with the Torah that it is good, and now it is no longer I that work it, but the sin dwelling in me, for I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good. For to wish is present with me, but to work the good I do not find. For the good that I wish to do, I do not do, but the evil I do not wish to do, this I practice. So I just see those connections there with the struggle, and with the sin, its desire is to control you, and it's just a constant struggle that we have to always be facing and just rising every day to meet the challenge. We know the challenge is going to be there, but we have to be aware of it and be aware that we have to fight every day.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think that touches on what Janet was talking about, and that actually brought something I had in my notes here in verse 7. We'll deal with that first before we go to Genesis 3:16. But this idea of mastering it. And here, I know the ISR translation could be a little strange in terms of verse 6, but it's essentially saying, why are you upset? You know what is right. You know what you could have done to yield the result you wanted, but you didn't do it. And so this idea in verse 7 about mastering, and you brought it to Romans 7, which I had right here in my notes, so thank you, is, mastering the sin that we want to do. And that's the key, right? That we want to do it, that we might not want to. And that's what Rav Shaul is talking about. And it's beautiful that, and encouraging that Rav Shaul, a student of Gamliel who knew it and understood it, had a personal revelation of Yeshua, still struggled with that. So I think that's an encouragement for us for sure, in this mastering. And then kind of connect to that too, actually, I found the verse about the blasphemy, and I think it ties in. It's in Matthew 9:3, and says, "And see, some of the scribes said to themselves, 'This one blasphemes.' And Yeshua, knowing their thoughts, said, 'Why do you think wicked thoughts in your heart?'" And that connected right back to what Janet was asking about, knowing the thoughts in our heart. I think that also is a connection to show that Yeshua, was in that same place there. In terms of Genesis 3:16, and I know we talked about this with Curtis, that here he talked about that the translation could be talking about not just this desire to, and it is, you're completely correct, that control. So awesome with that. And that on top of that, that it's really that the wife, because of that abdication from Adam to then, as we know, Rabbi Steve, that the woman's nature is nurturing and the man's nature is protective. So if the woman sees the protective dropping down, her nurturing nature is going to kick in and it's not going to let the ball drop. So in there, that is connected to here in 3:16 with this actually desire to control. And that struggle that we see played out now, that we have to reunify with the echadness and understand that usurping, and like Curtis said, like husbands, look at your wives right now, she wants the power. But I thought how he explained it in that context of that true vertical alignment in the creator design, that who would you want first in that line of sight, the protective or the nurturing? And so we need that protective. And for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Curtis Reed taught about usurping authority in the body of, it was a crisis in the body of Messiah usurping authority. And so it'll be reposted by Marty and the video crew, but you can go back to the live stream, and he just explains it in a way that's truly, truly mind numbing into the degree of what we got and the importance of that vertical alignment going back to here. And so we see that we were created to be echad, and I was going to touch here in in chapter 2, verse 18, it says, "It is not good for the man to be alone." Any man agree? The women were created as a helpmate, for the man, but that means that the man has to do his job. And I was joking with Curtis and Rabbi in the bathroom. I don't know if in the dining hall, there's a picture that I caught, and it was just kind of funny. It says, "Men, caution, step up," because there's a step up to the bathroom. But I thought it was just perfect because it's true. Caution, step up, because if we don't, then things are going to be out of balance in our own lives, and then that household bleeds into the congregation bleeds into the body, and that's just not acceptable. Arthur.
Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
I just like to keep things simple and practical sometimes, so this may be helpful. I know
Awesome,
it helped
yeah.
me. So
can't wait to hear.
I'd like to refer to Genesis 2, verse 3. "And Elohim blessed the seventh day and set it apart, because on it he rested from all his work, which he created, which in creating he had made." Now, I see that he set the seventh day apart, and it also says that he rested from all his work. And my question is, he did all the work, and he also did it in order. And I know sometimes I've been challenged, well, what did he do on what day, And we know he created everything, but what day? Do we really know the order of creation? And I found that a good time to do this is read the chapter, read the creation story on Sabbath and refer to it and meditate on it. So if anybody struggles with the order of creation, Sabbath is a very good day to do it because he rested from all his work. So what was his work? It's there.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we know that the Shabbat is, a type and shadow of the eternal rest that we have every week. that island of shalom, as rabbis mentioned before, and you get to that point where you just, the sun starts setting on Shabbat. You're like, no, come back, I want more time, because it's truly, there's nothing like it. I mean, you feel it. You know, Rabbi has that in focus called kadosh time, and you can actually feel that time being different. I don't know about you, but when I wake up on Sunday morning, even this morning, this is my theory, that it's so far from the next Shabbat that Sunday to me personally is always the most, not difficult day in terms of daily stuff, but just it seems the most removed, and for me, the most difficult to possibly meditate on and think about deeper scriptural items. That's just me personally, but I just find that as we get to the Shabbat, it's just things really start to reveal themselves. So we know that Shabbat is that hint at that eternal rest, and I think that's a great way to spend the Shabbat, is to look at creation and see that what it was started as and what we can look forward to, as we know with the other Moadim being those hints towards later on. So thank you, Arthur, for that. Greg.
I was looking at the very beginning as sort of setting the scene, the first couple of verses, and then the first dialogue that happens is that small word that Rabbi often says, those 3 letters that are so difficult, is let. And that's starts the dialogue. And then you said, because in Philippians 2:5 it says, for let this mind be in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua. And then you said a still small voice at one point a couple minutes ago. It's been so long. I breathed since then. That creative voice that started the dialogue right at the beginning, and then this, as Rabbi says, that word is so difficult, but I thought sometimes in the creative process, looking back on what Elohim said, when we do that, it's a creative process in ourselves, and to work on the heart is just an awesome. That's all I have.
Amen. Go on. So thank you for saying that with that let, and then I know we have a couple more questions. You know, you think about the phrases, let me do it, or let go. That's all I can remember right now. But just the idea of, allowing for someone else or allowing for something to happen. And I think that ties into what I was going to mention here in chapter 3, verse 1, that Hasatan's job here, the first thing, he didn't say, here, I'm going to make you eat it, or say, eat this. Just a question. Is it true that he said that? And so we know from the 3 voices, we know that Hasatan is that cheerleader and that encourager, and we can let that question answer, and then spin, and then heart, and then actions, and then sooner or later you're somewhere where we shouldn't be, or we can let, like you said in Philippians 2:5, let this mind be in you, and the fullness of what that is, the fullness of Torah, the fullness of Yeshua, is something I was thinking about. Bear with me on this, but after Curtis's teaching, I was just visualizing this idea of the body of Messiah, and this might get a little out there, just trust me, that imagining everybody just imagine this lantern inside of you, or just right here, right? That you have this lantern, and you could light the lantern either way you go. You could light it with the light of Yeshua, or you could light it with the light of, or the darkness, light it with the darkness of Hasatan. And that together we know that we are the dwelling place of Elohim. We know that we are the body of Messiah. So just thinking of the power of us together, we know that we have to submit and remove our own preferences and get our own ways out of the ways, walking all of his ways, not walking all our own ways, that our heart is desperately sick. We know all of this, that his is the only good, so we can do that, and we can actually become the body of Messiah, almost in the way where we know that it says if we deny him, right, he will deny us. And denying is not just saying the words, although as Rabbi says that would be foolish, but the fact that almost we're actually not letting him be in our presence by denying it, by walking that way. And that big picture, to be that light, we actually, as a community, as a nation, we have that responsibility as him as the head to then prepare the body with that light for him to come back to. And that what really hit me was that Curtis explained how Hasatan was the original usurper, and that usurping is self-sovereignty, which is, I can do it better, right? And that maybe rather than this idea of the spiritual warfare as this big battle, but it's rebellion, it's usurping. So what really, really struck me and had goosebumps is, okay, if Hasatan is the original usurper, and our self-sovereignty is our biggest issue, which was his issue, are we going to be a disciple of Yeshua, which is imitation and duplication of him, or a disciple of Hasatan, and imitation and duplication of his ways, and that's not going to end well for anybody. So yeah, thank you, Greg, for bringing that. We have to let that light, we have to let go of our old ways, we have to let this mind be in us, and then we can actually become the body that we're called to be.
So we're up to chapter 6, and how many years did they live to bear so many children? 600, 700, 800. It seems very short when you read it from chapter 1 to chapter 6. But I also go back to how Yahweh felt when we become wicked and we want to be stiff-necked and we want to be stubborn, we don't want to walk the walk, that he so graciously and patiently asks us to walk all the time. And in Genesis 6:3, it says, "And Yahweh said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever in his going astray. He is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. So first of all, he does not want to strive with us, but not just him, his spirit. He doesn't want his spirit to strive with us. So why would we want to strive with him? Are we so really that faulty, or do we really think that we have the strength that we could try at least not to strive with him? But the interesting part is that later on he sends his own spirit as a helper. So he sends his spirit to help us not strive with him. So he's just so wonderfully marvelous and he's just so great. He's everything that instead of striving with us, with his spirit, he actually wants to help us get there. And also, we don't get to live 800 years, so I think that's awesome because we would be striving a long time. But I just think that that's very gracious of him that instead of striving with us, he sent us the Spirit as a helper.
Amen. And I know that that's my wife, my beautiful wife over there, for everyone who doesn't know. And Rabbi was right about how, and I think Shir was telling the story of, why did all of the Jewish men agree in their councils? Because they all went home and listened to their wives and then came back. But we know from chapter 2 that the wife was intended as the helpmate. And my wife made this connection, so I can't take credit for it. Was created as the helpmate, and then the Ruach was sent as a helper. And so we're not supposed to strive with the Spirit. Well, in that same way, we as husbands should not be striving with our wives, as they are there to help us. And so in that vertical alignment, in that correct design, we're all getting to that same place together, echad, and becoming more Yeshua-like together and not to strive with each other. So I have to do that. I have to get better at that. But I can tell you that Rabbi said it earlier, it's true. Happy wife, happy life. And that's scriptural. It's right there because we know that we have our wives as helpmates with us. And I know all of the men could attest that those days that we're striving, which is this idea of, constantly finding something to, pick on or bring up or something, it's futile. So if we can experience that in our marriage, we are looking to a marriage and we're given the marriage covenant as a type and shadow of that marriage, we should work on that here and then look to that marriage covenant later that we know that there's not going to be any striving in where we're going. Thank you.
Right, I love that about the not striving, the husbands not striving with the wives and vice versa. And that, especially the happy wife, happy life thing has always been a good guideline for me. I heard another version of that recently that I also thought was cool, happy spouse, happy house. So just, so that both sides of the equation each have something they can repeat to themselves as they're biting their tongue, or gripping onto the handle of the car or whatever is going on at the moment. It's interesting. There's this thing that I was wanting to kind of see whether or not it came out, because I don't always want to be the one who says something or who brings something out, but there is something really valuable for all of us guys and for all of the wives also in chapter 3 that we do try to make sure doesn't go uncovered. In chapter 3, there's, and okay, I'm going to invite you to speculate just a little bit, so it's a little, it's maybe a little agadic in nature, but, why did the Nachash, why did the serpent have the opening? Okay, why did he have the opening? He had the opening because of the line, nor touch it. Okay, and probably a lot of you recognize that in the original instruction given, it was just, you're not going to eat of it. The don't touch it doesn't show up there until we have Chava responding to the serpent saying, oh, we were told, Elohim has said, do not eat of it nor touch it. It's very interesting. So where did she get this? If it didn't come by the original instruction, if we follow the flow, it's somewhere in the link between Adam and her that might have come into the chain, because if we follow the flow, he's going to be receiving the instruction from the Creator. He's going to be then responsible for passing it along to his wife. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm certainly sensitive to the idea that I could pass along the instructions and, maybe add a little bit of my own ideas in there, and maybe, of course, accidentally create some strife or some problems for my wife as she's trying to do things or live things out, etc. There's a very heavy responsibility for those of us who are passing on the instructions not to alter them, not to fiddle with them, or at the very least, please do her or the people in your care or whatever the favor of tagging that little bit as, okay, maybe this part not Elohim has said, maybe this part I said, and leave the Elohim has said stuff really straight and plain. Because, look, it's not so much that men, teachers, however you flow in that chain, women who flow in that chain and have those that are under their authority, however that flows, it's not that you can't come up with good ideas. You might come up with some really good ideas. They may be beautiful. They may be inspired. I believe some of the traditions that we've received down through the ages are absolutely inspired. It's kind of hard to see how not, since some of them then, things that we don't find in the Torah, they're definitely traditions, but then they end up playing a crucial role in how everything play out with Mashiach. And so I think it's not so much that we can't come up with things. I just think it becomes a very, very critical part of our role in how we pass something down, that we correctly tag items. That we correctly associate the categories, that we say, okay, this was from Elohim, but this part over here was from us. This part was from him, this part was from me. And so I think when we do that accurately and responsibly, that we create a lot less strife.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Just a quick note on that. Absolutely. And brought to mind just when maybe you still write book reports. I guess, for some of the good old class you do. But when you had to write a term paper or a research paper, you always had to quote and cite where that information is coming from. Whether it's a primary source document, a secondary source document, a video, and there's, I don't know if they still teach it anymore, but the MLA, way of citing, I don't know if that still exists. I hope it does, because it's pretty useful. But this idea of you have to show where it's coming from, because it's really easy, and we see it all the time, whether that's news, whether that's people, and this goes back to the slander, is that we can say something, it's okay, where did you get that from? And so I think what Raymond is touching upon, and it's vital for that alignment, especially for husbands to wives, and Rabbi says this all the time, this is me, this is just me, and then he'll read from the Word to distinguish, because if we're making a case before the judgment throne, we're putting together a body of work to say, okay, please review it, and he's going to have the mightiest of red pens possible to look at our errors. And so I think we need to make sure that when we cite something, when we pass something down, when we teach something, and a lot of the time I think we don't even know we're teaching when we're passing along that instruction, whether that's in person or on Facebook or just in passing, wherever it is, we have to be very careful of what we're citing, because we will be accountable for that down the line. So one more question before we do a Curtis Reed full stop. Anders.
Okay, so it's more a reflection on what Sarah Beth was heading into about how he investigated the issue to make a decision what is going on. And it brought me to think about Ecclesiastics, how it's saying, chapter 1, verse 12 and 13, I, Kohelet, was sovereign over Israel in Jerusalem. I set my heart to seek out and search out by wisdom concerning all that has been done under the heavens. This evil task Elohim is giving to the sons of man to be humbled by it. So I just came to think but it's a humbling process to go and search the matter out. So he was actually humbling himself to go and see, okay, what happened? Because he knew what was going on. And then it brought to think about Matthew 18 process we talked about. To go to your brother, and that is chapter 18. And when you start in verse 11, it's just before this, he actually mentioned that for the son of Adam has come to save what was lost. So you saw a connection back to the beginning with all of this that I haven't seen before. Yeah.
Amen. Beautiful. Yeah, back to the beginning. Indeed, in saving what was lost, and we know Rabbi talks about things being corrupted. Think about a CD or a hard drive. It had to have something of value first before it's corrupted. You think about corrupt government or corrupt legal systems or anything else that's corrupt. There was something good, but it was lost. So yeah, thank you for that process and that humbling process. And we'll just end with this. Something that I wanted to say after Greg's comment is with that idea of being a disciple of Yeshua versus being a disciple of Hasatan. And what I mean by that, we know that discipleship is an imitation and duplication process, that we are mimicking behaviors, and those behaviors may be from other people, but ultimately they could be coming from the tree of life, as we know as Yeshua, or the tree of good and evil. That it really struck me that it's easier for Hasatan to simply encourage us in our own self-sovereignty, that with all his power that he could essentially do as the ruler of this world whatever he wants. And that really hit me that, okay, we have to be very careful what we do and to walk in the correct ways, to pass down that correct instruction, and ultimately in that humbling process understand the wicked thoughts of our heart, because if we don't, then it's really, really easy for just that little bit of fire to be lit, which is there deep and sick until we regain what was lost. Kurt, anything on the live stream? Are we? All right. Well, that's it for tonight for Bereshith. We'll have one of the men close us in prayer. Oh. We had Arthur, or now we need a dance off from earlier. We're going to have Arthur close us in prayer. I saw his hand first, sorry.
Father in heaven, we just come before you this evening. Just want to acknowledge you, Father, as our creator and maker and provider of all good things for us, Father. Thank you that we could learn today your Torah, beginning in Bereshith again, Father. Thank you for all those that participated. Thank you for your calling us to you, Father, and showing us the truth. Just ask you to be with us throughout tonight. Help us have a good rest. And come back tomorrow. And we especially ask a healing rest, Father, and all those that are not feeling well. Just give them the help and the strength they need so they can come back and be with us, Father, at services tomorrow and at the meals. We just want to thank you for all. In your Son's name, Yeshua. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I know 9:27, so parents, go pick up the children in Eureka, Katan Aleph, and Katan Bet.